I started drinking when I was 12. So I was a binge user. I was definitely a problematic drinker. My heart rate increases. My palms get sweaty. Drinking made me feel better. Drinking made me feel brave and courageous and like I fit in. That's when I decided I was going to move to Asia, become an English teacher. Someone had moved a manhole cover off a manhole, and I took a very inelegant dive into a Taiwanese sewer. It's a very powerful thing to know what your purpose is.
Welcome to Choose Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Abna Mariri, author, survivor, and changemaker. Each episode delves into victorious stories over addiction. We bring hope and actionable guidance to those on this journey. Choose transformation with us. Choose victory. Choose life. Today, it is with great pleasure that we extend a warm welcome to Leigh Ann, the visionary master coach behind the Be Change Coaching. Her coaching work centers around being an accountability partner, guiding and challenging clients to progress in their recovery journey by crafting practical and achievable plans. Leigh Ann's coaching ethos revolves around fostering courageous conversations and co-creating an environment where sustainable recovery and wellness can thrive. In addition to a coaching practice, she also trains and certifies professional recovery coaches while spearheading a successful outpatient program offered through both in-person and online platforms. We are honored, we are privileged to have Leigh Ann with us today to share her expert insights regarding the intricate relationship between wellness and recovery, as well as to elaborate on her unique approach. Thank you so much, Leigh Ann. I'm over the moon that you have joined us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Leigh Ann Brierley. Did I get it right?
You did, spot on.
Yeah, for gracing us with your presence, and welcome to Choose Life. Leigh Ann, before we get into that space of recovery coaches, you yourself have a journey. Give us a bit of context of your own journey with your alcohol use disorder.
So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I have to say I'm a little nervous.
It's all right. It's all right. I also get nervous, by the way.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
So that makes the two of us.
Okay, brilliant. Yes. So my recovery journey started in 2008, New Year's Day. I was living and working as a teacher in Taiwan. Yeah. And I was walking down a pavement in the wee hours of the morning, as you do, and as luck would have it, someone had moved a manhole cover off a manhole, and I took a very inelegant dive into a Taiwanese sewer.
Sure.
So when you want to talk about spiritual awakenings, that was mine. Not elegant, not
glamorous.
No, not at all. Little smelly. I had a moment when, after having been in treatment previously.
So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
And I want to get the full view of it.
Yeah.
Take us back into your alcohol abuse, if I may call it that.
Sure.
How did it manifest, and what was it all about?
It's interesting how so many people think like an alcoholic is someone who drinks every day, drinks when they wake up, drinks to get through the day. So I was a binge user. I was definitely a problematic drinker, but I wasn't an everyday drinker. And for me, that was
just when you say binge user.
Weekends, 2-3 days at a time, and then I might go for a week without having a drink. I didn't, my level of denial was I don't drink every day. I don't drink in the morning. I don't drink at lunchtime. But when I drank, I couldn't stop.
Once you light the fire.
Once that switch is on, it's on. Yeah. And it started to create massive problems in my life around work, around relationships, around connection. I did go to treatment in around 2003 for depression, as you do. And they were like, no, this is not about depression. This is about alcoholism. Went away, joined the 12-step program, managed to get 12 months.
How did life look like after your binges?
Messy.
Messy.
Messy, chaotic, lots of remorse, guilt, shame. I'm sure as someone in recovery, that narrative of this is the last time, I'm not going to do it again. You know, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm never going to drink again. And 3-4 days later, when I started to feel better, like a drink seemed like a fantastic idea.
Yeah. To reward yourself for the 3 days or
so
2
well.
weeks I've done so well. And
Right, and it's
and
Friday.
Now it's Friday.
And I've worked so hard, and everybody else drinks.
My goodness.
Right, and I come from a drinking family. I come from a long line of illustrious alcoholics. Both my grandmothers had severe drinking problems. My dad was a heavy lifetime drinker.
Sure.
My family drinks a lot, you know. My peer group drank a lot, so I kind of thought it was
It's true
normal.
when they say it's hereditary.
Well, they say that 40 to 60% of addiction is kind of predetermined by your genetic makeup. But then you've got to look at things like environment, social group,
Friends.
you know, friends, trauma, you know, all that sort of thing.
Stress, you know, pressure from work.
Exactly. And there was plenty of that, you know. And it kind of manifested around, I would go out to have a good time, but when it was on, it was on. And when everybody else went home, I would carry on drinking.
Is there, you know, sometimes we do certain things to mask. You know, I use drugs to mask. Did you use alcohol to mask a certain life or certain things?
You know, for me, there was always this kind of weird feeling of like, I don't really know where I belong socially. So the mask was, I'm super confident, I do well, I achieve. And the masking was like, I'm very insecure and I don't know where I fit in the world.
Sure. So it was to project an image that you're basically not.
Well, and it's hard to do that sustainably, right?
Yes, correct.
To kind of show up in the world as someone who seems super confident and, you know, with loads of self-worth and all that sort of thing, and really behind, like, I'm just like really insecure, really overwhelmed, you know, really battling to process some of just the sensory input of life. And drinking made me feel better. Drinking made me feel brave and courageous and like I fit in.
And your family at the time?
My parents didn't have a great marriage. There was always a lot of like fighting and dysfunction in the family space. My dad, like I say, was always a heavy drinker and temperamental when he drank. So you never knew what you were going to get.
Yes.
And also just came from a peer group where there was drinking. I started drinking when I was 12, which is very young, right? And there was always alcohol available. So there's an interesting psychiatrist out of Stanford, Anna Lemke, who wrote a wonderful book called Dopamine Nation. And she talks about nurture, nature, neighborhood.
Nurture, nature?
Neighborhood.
Okay.
The neighborhood being the accessibility we have. You know, my parents always had a fully stocked bar. We would steal alcohol from a very early age. You know, so it was just, and it wasn't every day and it wasn't all the time. And, you know, we'd get caught and we'd get into trouble. And but it was part of my life from the time I was in primary school.
Okay.
Yeah, and the young brain doesn't really stand a lot of chance when you start using something behaviorally, I think it was, at that point.
My goodness.
Yeah.
When did you know that it was now affecting the quality of your life and somehow it was leading you on a destructive path?
My mother knew before I did.
How did that happen?
My mother, when I was about 19, took me aside and said, young lady, your drinking's a problem. You've got to look at it. You've got to remember that both your grandmothers had problems with alcohol, you know. And I was just like, you know what we like at 19.
Dismissive,
like,
of course.
What does my mother know? If only I knew right now what I knew then.
Yes.
But I went to rehab when I was 30 for the first time.
When you were 30?
Yep.
Oh.
But my drinking was a problem. My drinking was a problem at university. My drinking, I worked in the restaurant industry. I owned a bar.
Yeah. So access was there.
Always. You know, there was
break.
always access to alcohol. And again, when everybody else went home, I would carry on. So it had a massive impact on my business.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I went into voluntary liquidation and I went to rehab for the first time, the only time. And
Describe your life at that point. What are the mitigating factors that led you to go to rehab?
I had a suicide attempt.
Suicide?
Yeah, I had tried to overdose on pills and wine, and I was emotionally very unstable. I was socially disconnected. I think I was just scared the whole time.
So you're a real mess.
Yes. And not even a hot mess, just a mess.
Just a mess.
Just a mess, battling to pay the bills, really like disconnected, scared, overwhelmed, and, ended up in hospital.
When you say disconnected, that means you kind of, how would you describe, for my viewer, disconnection? That means you don't feel like you fit in anywhere.
And especially with yourself. So I just didn't have a connection to me anymore. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know who I was. It's an anxiety, like out of control anxiety, just waking up in the morning and thinking, how do I go about this? How do I get from A to B today? How do I show up for work? And I have a very loving, caring, amazing mother. And I went to her and said, I'm not coping. And she said, okay, let's do something about this.
So now you're going to rehab. So let's zoom in on that stint in rehab. How was it?
I loved it. I loved rehab. I was one of those people who's like, I'm going to become a counselor. This is the best thing that ever happened to me.
So you're not going there to recover. Already you're seeing opportunities, dollar signs.
Right. I loved the space. Yeah. I only spent 2 weeks in rehab, which is unusual. Yes. It was a dual diagnosis in East London.
Okay, dual diagnosis. What does that mean for
mental health and recovery, addiction treatment together,
So psychiatric intervention was required.
Yeah.
And rehabilitation.
Absolutely. And, there is a huge correlation between people with substance use disorders and mental health challenges.
Yes.
Anxiety, depression, bipolar, and it was great. I loved it.
I look forward to getting into that, but coming out of that, 2 weeks is unusual. Eh? Did you heal or it was a question of saying, I'm ready to get out?
It was what my medical aid gave me. And unfortunately, because of everything that was going on with my business, etc., that was the resources that there were for my treatment. I was introduced to the 12-step program at that point, and I got out of treatment and I started going to meetings.
The AA meetings?
AA predominantly because I was staying with my mother in the Eastern Cape at the time, and there was a very small kind of recovery community. But also then came up to Joburg and carried on going to meetings and being in the 12-step process, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful resource.
I must ask you this question. Any relapse?
Yes, a major relapse in a Parkhurst bar after about 8 months because I felt like I could manage.
What led to that? Because, now you've got all these tools that you've learned from rehab. You're strong, you want to get out, you want to do things. What led to that?
I'm going to say me not really having accepted the fact that I had a problem with alcohol. I thought I could manage. I thought I was well.
Sure.
Right. And I was working in a restaurant and, afterwards we would go across the road. And,
so you went back to the restaurant life again?
Yeah.
Sure.
It was, I think we go back often to what we know.
Yeah, correct.
So I had a 5-year relapse.
5 years?
I relapsed for 5 years after that.
My goodness.
Yep.
Did you manage? Did your life change? Did it deteriorate? Did it get from bad to worse? It always does, but...
That's when I decided I was going to move to Asia, become an English teacher.
To escape?
Well, kind of, I was tired of everybody telling me what to do.
Okay, fair.
If I wanted to drink, I was going to drink, and I didn't want anyone to tell me what to do. So... I packed my bags and I went off to Asia for a year to teach English. It was unmanageable. Yeah. But once you've been in treatment or in recovery,
Yes.
It's knowing that this is not healthy, that this is not sustainable, that this is not good for me, and doing it anyway. And that's that like real spiritual like disconnect. It's super hard.
So why was it different from the previous one?
Because I knew that I had a problem. I just didn't really want to believe it.
So the first one you didn't accept. The first one you were kind of...
I was like, I went to rehab and...
Denial.
And I spent 3 days or 4 days there, and I came out of the haze, and then I was like, oh, okay, they're right. I really do have a problem with alcohol. But when I got well, or when I got sober, let's say, I was very much like, oh, like I know I can handle it this time. And I've seen that so many times with the people I work with. This time's going to be different. This time I know what to do. This time I can handle it. And, you know, drugs are a powerful thing. You know, so, and I mean, I definitely put alcohol in the drugs class. You know, it is the most powerful one probably out there that impacts more people, especially in our country. Thank goodness I was walking down the road that night, fell in that particular sewer, and recognized in that moment, Abner, that if I didn't change my life, like that is literally where my life was going to go. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done. You know that moment.
Yes.
You know that moment.
I know that moment.
I'm done. I can't.
Speak about your interpersonal relationships with friends and stuff like that. Did that take a knock?
I've been very blessed to have people in my life who have been in my life for a long time. I think also those five years where I was relapsing, I wasn't home. So I don't think people got to see the worst of it. My family, my close friends, this side. And a lot of it would happen kind of after hours. People even said to me when I stopped drinking, why did you stop drinking? You were so much fun. You were like, you know, you were so, but they didn't see the carnage and they didn't experience the kind of the emotional pain of what was going on for me. So almost like some sort of double existence, you know.
Duplicitous.
And that's hard to live with as well, right?
Okay.
To feel in integrity and to feel authentic when, you know, there are these things going on that only you know about. And I also knew that I wasn't okay.
So when you fall in that manhole, what spiritual awakening is happening? You know, I'm thinking you are in Asia, you're drinking, also your relationships are taking a knock in terms of, I mean, boyfriends and stuff like that.
No boyfriend.
No boyfriend. No.
Plenty of boyfriends.
Plenty of boyfriends. My goodness. So it is a trend. Eh? Once you get addicted.
The morals are a little loose.
The morals are a little
the
loose.
decision making's not great, right? You know, we make
we're
some
excited about life. And
we make some interesting choices.
Yeah.
I just had a moment, Abner, where I just knew that it's not how I wanted my life to be anymore. You know, there's a saying when you've been in some sort of treatment program, like a head full of recovery and a body full of drugs, it's not a nice feeling.
No, it's not.
You know, and I got up, I got cleaned up, literally, and I just was like, I'm done. That's kind of the easy decision to make. The work is like, okay, how am I going to stay stopped? How am I going to, like, be done? Right? Not just like I've made a decision to stop drinking, but I'm making a decision to change the way I go about my business and live my life.
Is there something that you would ascribe to that particular moment of reawakening? Almost,
I don't know what it was. The universe, higher power, you know, it was just, I don't know, when people say a knowing. There's this idea of like spontaneous recovery.
Yes.
Like you have a moment, an experience that is just strong enough and big enough to be able to say, whatever it takes to be well, to be clean or sober, like I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to commit to that and to myself to do, you know, really to do whatever it takes.
Fascinating. I've got so many questions zooming in my mind. After that moment of reawakening, you don't go through the 12-step program.
I actually didn't. It would have been something I would have reconnected to if I was in an English-speaking country with access to the 12-step program. But I found myself, I was living in a small town in Taiwan. The English meetings were in Taipei, which was like an hour away. And I connected to a program called Women for Sobriety, which is an American-based program. They don't have 12 steps, they have 13 positive affirmations.
13 positive affirmations.
And it was old school. There was no instant chat, there was no online meetings, so there was boards, message boards that you could post to for support, for encouragement, and you would then post on the board and then wait for someone to reply. But there was no online meetings, and that was how I started to do it. I was just, if I felt myself feeling overwhelmed, getting triggered, needing some sort of support, I would post onto these message boards.
And you will get feedback.
Yeah, and wait for someone to come back and say, like a lot of it just encouragement, right? Hang in there. And then to go through, and I really don't remember the 13 affirmations anymore, but to go through these affirmations of like really about that I deserve to be well, I deserve to be happy, and...
so the power of positive thinking.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And to continue to remind myself of where I didn't want to be. What I've learned subsequently is it's much more powerful to think about where I do want to be, or where I do want to go. But in the beginning, right, sometimes you're just putting together 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes at a time, a day at a time, to get through that real anxiety and angst of I've made this decision and I feel uncomfortable or uneasy, and I know that having a drink will take that away. Whatever your kind of poison is I know that to not feel, to not experience this discomfort, all I have to do is have a drink.
Sure.
And that's the hard stuff, right?
And sometimes we do things because we run away from ourselves.
Right.
And part of the healing is not necessarily external to some degree, it's internal. Did you have to do some inner work?
Oh, so much.
To accept yourself and stuff like that? What did you have to do?
It's work that I continue doing to this day, and I'm sure you know the same thing. As a person who's chosen to be in recovery, is all that internal work of self-acceptance, self-worth, self-love. And it does start with the self, not because we're selfish, but because it's super important to be able to kind of get in alignment with ourselves. What do I need, want, and value in my life? Because for so long I've just been running away or masking or ignoring, work around my relationships with my family, my relationships with myself, what it was that I wanted in and from my life. And I continue to do the work,
It's profound.
Right. It never stops.
Incredible.
And
It never
I love
stops,
my job. So when people are like, oh, I've got to do the work, but I love the work.
Well, when you discover your purpose, you never work again,
Right. And it's also, when we talk about work, it's like, what an amazing thing to be able to grow and develop and change and do things differently.
Our conversation will continue shortly. As you watch our podcast today, you may be facing challenges with one or other form of addiction, or know someone who actually is. Trust me, I've been there, and I want to help you. Visit abna.africa to download a complimentary workbook designed to support your journey toward overcoming addiction. This workbook, filled with exercises and activities, has helped me and countless others to stay clean. It's absolutely free of charge at abna.africa. Start your path to recovery now. Let's conquer addiction together. And remember to log on to abna.africa.
So all this path, obviously, is to prepare you. I always say my situation is not my destination, but my situation is my preparation.
Okay, wow.
So fundamentally, all this that you've been through was grounds enough to prepare you for life and coaching.
Absolutely. I mean, so I moved around a bit. I spent some time in Vietnam, and then I ended up in Saudi Arabia, of all places.
Globetrotting.
Tough gig.
And all this is under the
Teaching.
English teaching.
I was teaching at a women's university in Saudi Arabia, and I decided it was time to come home. I met with a friend who said to me, why don't you think about becoming a life coach? And I have to say, I rolled my eyes out loud, and I was like, oh, you know, everybody's just becoming a coach.
Yeah.
You know, you can't swing a cat without hitting a coach. And she said, there's this guy in Cape Town, I want you to meet him. And I was in Cape Town, and I met with him, and he was a coach. And I walked, I want to cry. I walked out of there, and I just knew.
Intrinsically.
I just knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Is it?
Yeah. And I started doing the coaching with him online in Saudi.
Why does it make you emotional?
It's a very powerful thing to know what your purpose is.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And to actually find it.
Which a lot of people don't have the privilege of doing, right?
Yes.
And as I started to learn about coaching, I was like, wow, this is the way to get well. Not necessarily the way to be clean and sober. I believe the 12-step program is the best place to get clean and sober. For a lot of people with addiction and substance use disorders, you want to get clean and sober, get into the rooms, get some connection, you know.
Talk to people.
Listen to the stories, right? But if you want to be well, in alignment with that, I was like, this is how I get well. And I made some inquiries and did some calls and started to ask around and, you know, connected with this very interesting man out of Minnesota. And his name's Louis. And he said, I want to come to South Africa and train recovery coaches. He is a recovery coach in the States. And we started to connect and talk. And then unfortunately, his doctor said to him, no, you can't travel to South Africa. He'd had a heart situation. He said the travel time is just too long.
It'll take too much pressure on his
And
system.
he trained me online. I came across this name that had kept coming up, David Collins.
David Collins, yeah.
And David Collins reached out to me and said, I hear you've been making inquiries about recovery coaching. So David said, I want to talk to you. And that's actually when we get there, that's where the outpatient program stemmed from, is David and I co-created the program, and he took a massive chance on me 9 years ago.
My goodness. And your personal experience, did they shape your approach and outlook and perspective on your recovery coaching?
So the idea that he has always taught is that there are multiple pathways to recovery. And I love that concept of we all can get there in our own way. And that there are all these wonderful tools and techniques, and there's the 12-step program, and there's coaching, and there's therapy, and there's counseling. And what we need to do is help people create a space and a system that works for them, right? Rather than just saying you have to do it that way. Because I've never met a person, especially a person with substance use disorder, who didn't have a mind of their own and want to be the boss of themselves. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're a grown-up. When people start saying, do it like this and do it like that, and you must do this and you must do that, a lot of us become rebellious, defiant.
Defiant, especially addicts.
Right? And what I was taught after I became a coach and started working for David is we got to meet people where they're at. You know, we've got to like get to know someone, because you are your own expert.
Yes.
Like you're the guy who knows Abner better than anyone else is going to know him.
And the idiosyncrasies and the challenges, the struggles, the flaws, the victories and stuff. What is a recovery addiction coaching not about?
It's not about pathologizing. You know, it's
what is pathologizing? So
giving a label or a name to things. You know, like this is an illness. This is why you're ill. It's not about like treating addiction. When I have a client who needs to go to rehab, I step away. you know, and I allow the treatment team to really do what they need to do. Maybe it's therapy or counseling or social work. That's not my space, you know, so treatment is really around the, you know, the psychosocial aspects of helping people understand their addictions, helping people unpack their traumas, you know, and I'm very happy to stay in my lane around these things, you know. So it's also, it's not about, you know, it's not about trying to fix. This idea that addicts are people who are broken and need to be fixed is, to me, just not true.
It's absurd.
Right. Some of the most creative, phenomenal, you know, brilliant people I've ever met are the people I've met through the work that I've done. I see a lot of people as very troubled. And I love Gabor Mate's work. You know, the substance provided a solution to a problem and then became the problem. But initially it was the solution, right?
Yeah.
You remember it being your solution?
100%.
Right. You know, so I'm not there to replace the work of anyone. I'm not there to be a counselor or a therapist or a medical doctor. But I am there to help my clients develop strong relationships with those people.
Yeah. So having said that, what would be the reason people would approach you for your recovering coaching interventions?
Treatment is about stopping. Recovery is about staying stopped. You know, treatment is about getting clean and sober. Recovery coaching is about making the most out of my life now that I am clean and sober.
Okay, do you coach those who are clean and sober?
I can coach people into treatment.
Yes.
I can coach people who have recognized that they might be misusing or abusing a substance and want to change the way they do things. I can coach people who have already chosen to be clean and sober, right? And I also, to be completely transparent, I work with people who are in moderation programs.
What is moderation programs?
So maybe someone who's drinking a little too much or using a little too much and it's getting a bit out of control and they decide that they don't want to be abstinent, but they do want to change their patterns around their use of substances. We can do that. You know?
That's beautiful.
Right?
What would be those patterns? Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to get into your line of thinking.
Sure. The thing about like using substances is there actually are people in the world across who use substances and it doesn't mess up their lives. I don't know if you've come across the work of Carl Hart, who's a very interesting Columbia professor, right?
Yes.
And he talks about drug use for grown-ups. You know, but it's obviously it's stigmatized and it's illegal and all these things. When it starts to get people into trouble, it affects my personal life, my professional life. Maybe I'm starting to have some sort of emotional or spiritual consequences as a result of my using.
Yes.
You know, I'm cutting out on some of my responsibilities. I made a bit of an idiot of myself at the last company function.
Yes.
And I want to change that, but I don't necessarily want to be abstinent. It always starts moderation with a period of abstinence. So 30, 60, 90 days. If somebody can't go 30, 60 or 90 days without the use of a substance, they're probably not going to be able to be a moderate user.
So you would advise somebody in your sessions to say, those who are in active addiction, let's try a 30 days.
I'm going to say that not everybody is a candidate for moderation because I think we get to a point where abstinence needs to be our choice.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I mean, there's not so many moderate crack smokers out there.
We want to see it happen.
Right.
But the reality of it happening is two different things.
And I would say somebody who's drinking or using 4 or 5 times a week to excess, where it's having major negative consequences, is probably not a good candidate for moderation.
Yeah.
You know? And we've got to be realistic with ourselves. So the first thing is that to break the denial, to get honest with ourselves, right?
Yes.
And I think some people balk at the idea, you want me to not drink for 30 days? I'm like, good luck with moderation. You know, you want me to go 90 days without
30
like
days sounds
using
like 30
cocaine.
years,
It's
yeah,
like, oh, I don't know if you're such a good candidate.
Yeah, correct.
You know, and it's important that we get honest with ourselves. You know, that we get open with ourselves, because I'm not a good moderation candidate.
But I've got listeners there listening.
Yes.
All over, you know,
Amazing.
of all walks of life. You know, rich, poor, because this is an equal employer. Addiction.
Right. Equal opportunities.
So now I'm struggling. I come to you.
Okay.
To a coach. What are the outcomes that I would get from you?
So what I'm looking to help people with is, where are you today, and where do you want to be at some point in the future? I have no agenda as a coach.
Yes.
You know, my work is, like I said, to meet you where you're at and say, you recognize that this is going on in your life and you want to make some changes. What do you want the outcomes to be? Okay. You know, what are your goals? And in a professional and personal space, around your relationships, your career, your family, whatever it is, what is it that you want to achieve? Not what do I want for you. There are too many people telling, let's just say, people who use drugs, yes, what to do and how to do it, and everybody's got so much great advice. But I'm going to go back to that idea that you are your own expert.
Yes.
And because of that, you know what you need and want. You maybe just need someone to hold the space while you get clear on that. And that's my role. Right, I want to see all my clients get well.
Yes, yes.
And for some of them, that means complete abstinence. And for some of them, that means medicated maintenance.
Yes.
You know, and for some of them, it means something a little different.
Yes.
My role is, that's what you want to do. Yeah. Okay, how are you going to do it?
Yes.
And what do you need from me
to help you?
Get there?
Yes, including referrals to any treatment facility, should you read
or
a psychiatrist or something like that.
Yeah.
Are there various disciplines that you use in your method of coaching?
I'm a big fan of positive psychology.
Okay.
You know, really kind of looking at our strengths, you know, stretching ourselves around our challenges. We work very systemically. So I love to get the opportunity to work with family support systems in not just the individual. There's a lot of, I'm a huge kind of layman fan of how neuroscience plays in like brain development, how we, you know, change our thought patterns, change the way we do things. I'm completely fascinated. You know, if I could remember all the parts of the brain, that would be great. But so I'm very much a, you know, layman in that space. I have, you know, I'm fans of certain behavioral psychologists and neuroscientists whose work I follow and try and bring in. I'm a massive fan of Brené Brown. And
Brené Brown is brilliant.
And the way she, you know, she's also used behavioral work in her own recovery. There's some very smart people out there sharing their wisdom.
Once you zoom in on the space of addiction, the amount of knowledge is incredible.
And the science is changing.
And the science is forever changing. I mean, it's forever changing. Recovery plan. What are some of the, how do I put it, some of the salient points that you would advise an addict to have a recovery plan that is sustainable?
The thing that I always say to my clients is there is no magic bullet.
Actually, let's back off.
Okay.
What is a recovery plan?
So a recovery plan is something that you put into place that you can follow that helps you consistently sustain your recovery. Okay. I mean, some people have life plans and some people have business plans, and it really just is a set of actionable steps, you know, that is manageable and sustainable for you. It's like it's better to go to the gym 3 times a week for 3 months than go 7 times a week for 3 weeks, right?
Yes.
And it's the same with recovery. It's better to bring things into your plan that are sustainable for you You don't want to burn yourself out at the beginning of recovery where you're all excited and you feel super motivated. What the best thing to do with that time is to put in actions, choices, plans that are achievable over the long run. No, but I want to go to 7 meetings a week. It's like, that's great, but let's rather look at 3, you know, because 3 is going to be sustainable in the long run. You know, let's look at what you can do in terms of your resources, in terms of, you know, your family commitments, your professional commitments. It's, and what do you enjoy, right? What's good for you is not necessarily good for me. I think routine and structure is super, super important. Right?
Routine and structure.
Right.
So it's got to be routine.
Well, also
Structure.
I think taking some of the decision-making out of it, rather than saying I'm going to go to 3 support groups or meetings a week, say I'm going to go to a support group on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday.
Yeah.
And then remove the decision-making from there. I know I go on a Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and that's what I do. Not, oh, damn, it's Sunday and I haven't been to any meetings. I know I said I was going to go to 3, but, you know, next week. To try and habitualize some of these things. If you have a morning ritual,
Yes.
whether it's journaling or meditation or prayer or doing the Just for Today reading, you know, try and habitualize that so you get up and that's the way that you start your day. It's, if you have the resources for some sort of like psychosocial support, whether it's therapy or counseling, you know, try and make room for that. It doesn't have to be every week.
Yeah.
You know, it can be every second week, it can be every third week. Especially for people
It
with...
could be once a month.
Right,
depending
especially
on
for
the
people
resources,
with
yeah.
mental health challenges who are on medical aid.
Yes.
There are ways to flip inpatient benefits for outpatient benefits.
Yeah, true.
You know, it's, if you belong to a congregation or a faith-based organization, find out if there's resources
Yeah.
in the congregation, and there often
Available.
are.
Yeah.
In the silent battles of addiction, every hopeful story can be a key to liberation. As we take a quick pause from our chat, I invite you to step through The Door, my memoir in which I give an uncensored account of my journey through drug addiction hell. Each chapter is a testament to the strength we all possess, even when hope seems like a distant light. From the gripping darkness of substance abuse to the uplifting journey towards clarity, my story is laid bare, raw, and real. Whether you are touched by addiction or walk alongside someone who is, your journey to hope can start today. It's available now as an ebook, audiobook, and paperback on TalksTV.Africa. Unlock the narrative that could redefine your understanding of addiction and recovery. Get my book, The Door, by logging into TalksTV.Africa today. Choose the key that fits your lock. Choose life.
Now, you dabble as an accountability partner. How do you foster and consolidate a relationship between you as an accountability partner and the person that you coach?
So the idea of accountability is, what resources do you need around you to action this plan that you want to put into place?
Yes.
And as the accountability partner, it's what the client needs from me.
Yes.
So maybe the client will say to me, can I check in with you, you know, via WhatsApp, or if I need something around implementation, can I call you just to check myself?
Yes.
And I'm like, sure. I'm very available to my clients in that sense.
So you help me as your client. You know, there's you, you know, as a recovery coach, you help me to develop a recovery plan. Am I correct?
Yep.
Now that I've developed it, you then also act as a accountability partner.
Sure, if that's what you want.
If that's what I want.
Right.
Of course I would want that.
Well,
because-
not everybody does, funnily enough.
Oh.
Some people will say, you know, I'm going to chat to my sponsor about it.
What is a sponsor in the context and why is it important?
So A sponsor traditionally from my work, which is not in the 12-step space, but I have made it my business to understand the steps, to understand the ethos of the 12-step program, because it's an important resource for my clients. A sponsor is there to help you work through the 12 steps of the 12-step program. And sometimes, as things have changed over the years, sponsors have become accountability partners, right?
Yes.
I'd like you to check in with me 3 times a week. Yes. I'd like you to send me your weekly gratitudes or your weekly inventory or whatever it is.
You know, as a recovering addict, one day at a time for me is like an achievement. You know, if I finish 24 hours without using, it's an achievement. So strategies for celebrating milestones and setting realistic goals. How do you assist with that?
So I'm like you. I think 24 hours, every 24 hours is an amazing accomplishment. We do need to remember that when we use substances, there's a lot of reward in the brain. There's a lot of pleasure and reward associated with substances. So I think it is important to have things that you're moving towards. You know, when I get to 90 days, the family's going to go away for the weekend. Or when I get to 6 months, I'm going to buy myself that great new pair of shoes I've had my eye on. Because a lot of people just start to deprive themselves of pleasure and reward, but your brain wants it.
Yes.
Right? So it's good to kind of take care of yourself. Maybe it's a massage or a pedicure or, you know, a really nice
pedicure.
hair. Right, there we go. Holiday for the feet.
I need a manicure.
There you go. It's all those little parts of self-love and self-care, self-love and self-care, and the belief that you're worthy of it.
Yeah, correct.
Right? I also believe one day at a time.
Yes.
But I know what the goal is.
Yes.
And that's where coaching also comes in.
Yes.
One day at a time, what are you moving towards?
Yes.
We've got to be very careful of depriving ourselves of pleasure. A lot of stimulant users as well, like the big hits, like the big dopamine hits, you know. So do something that's fun and exciting. Go and jump out of an aeroplane or, you know, skateboard down a hill or ride your bike down a mountain. There's going to need to be some sort of excitement, you know, and pleasure in life, because a lot of people go through periods of like real boredom, right? Like life feels a little boring, a little like kind of routine. And we're not only addicted to substances, we're addicted, a lot of us, to chaos, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people self-sabotage when they get to that point where everything's going perfectly nicely. Let me like really muck it up, right? Let me like create some like danger and like risk and whatever it is. So it is important to kind of reward yourself, to take care of yourself, to do fun and exciting things. Otherwise, recovery can feel very boring and very normal.
So how do you assist people to build solid structures of support?
It's connection is enormous. Connection is a super, super, super like important part of recovery. I think it's a cornerstone. You know, to have strong, authentic connections. And recovery support groups and 12-step programs, I think, are really places to build that, as are congregations and interest groups. And it's exploring and looking. And look, sometimes it's experimentation. Sometimes it's trial and error. I often say to people, just remember, it took you 10 years to get here. It's not going to take you 30 days to leave here, right? It's a process, and a lot of the time what we're shooting for is that progress, not perfection. And not everybody manages to put long-term recovery together without a few slips and slides along the way. What I do believe is that care, compassion, understanding is super important in these spaces. Like shaming and guilting people doesn't get them well.
Can you unpack wellness for us?
So to me, wellness is a lifestyle. Wellness is a mindset. It's like, what value do I bring? How can I show up in a way that leaves the situation better than when I started?
So how do you integrate the practices of wellness strategies in the recovery plan and the advice that you give to your clients?
Slowly. You know, I think one of the biggest things that people battle with in early recovery and recovery in general is patience.
Patience.
Guys, remember, like, you know, I drank for 23 years, not every day, but I drank for 23 years.
Sure.
It's like I need to be patient with myself
Yes.
while I learn,
Yes.
while I figure things out, while I try this and I try that. Because we all get there in our own time, right? I don't believe that there's any like one size fits all when it comes to this. I do believe that, like I said earlier, structure and routine are very important. You know, finding a space where you can be authentic about what's going on for you is very important. Feeling cared for and knowing that people are not going to judge you. But my job, my role when I work with people is I'm going to walk with you through this process and I'm going to help you figure it out. And you're going to tell me what you need and want here, because everybody is so quick to try and take away an addict's autonomy. Take away his keys, take away his car, cut off his bank account, don't let him have his credit cards, you know. We're all grown-ups here.
Yeah.
We need to treat each other like adults and be like, I trust you. What do you think it is you need
Yeah.
to be well, to recover, to show up differently in your life? People are like, you're asking me? I'm like, of course I'm asking you. Like, you're the boss of you. I don't want to be, you know, I'm not a mom. I chose not to have children. I don't want to be anyone's mom.
Yeah.
I'm not the recovery police.
Yes.
You know, I'm not here to like, right,
Recovery police.
wrap people on their knuckles and say, you know, recovery SAPs.
Why are your eyes like that?
Right, what have you been doing?
What have you been doing?
Like, hey, what's going on? You seem to be in a bit of trouble at the moment. I haven't heard from you for a while. You know, what do you need to reconnect into a space of wellness for yourself? Oh, you've had a really bad relapse. Okay, let's figure that out.
Leigh Ann, what are some of the wellness practices that you engage in helping your clients and that have shown to be extremely beneficial to your clients? You know?
So I'm going to say there's 5 things that I think are integral in everybody. The first one is let's try and eat well.
Let's try and eat well.
Right, just physically, you know, if you're driving home from work every day, eating McDonald's and Burger King because you're in such a rush and such a hurry, it probably means your routine and structure is not in place. I'm not talking about, you know, super healthy eating. I'm just saying, like, take care of yourself.
Nutrition. Yeah.
Right. The next thing is rest well.
Rest well.
Right.
Okay.
And you can listen to all these fancy guys with all their, you know, they sit on their heads and, you know, take ice baths and do all this like crazy wellness stuff. They will all say that sleep is one of the most fundamental aspects of wellness.
I struggle to sleep. So how many hours would you
7
recommend?
to 9, they reckon.
7 to
9
hours.
Yes. So sleeping well. There's also things like non-sleep deep rest. You know, you lie on your bed or on your sofa for 10 to 20 minutes.
Yes.
Nature is a form of rest. Artistic creativity is a form of rest.
Yeah. Number 3?
Move.
What do you mean
Move your body.
Move your body.
However you like to move your body. Play paddle, go to the gym.
Dance.
Dance. Dance around your kitchen. You don't have to like go to a dance class. Go for a walk around the block, do some yoga stretches, just find a way to move. Exercise is the single most effective way to lower cortisol and adrenaline in our bodies. Number 4 is to connect authentically.
Number 4, connect authentically.
Right. You know.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm going to tell you my cup is going to be very full when I leave here today. Like I feel like there's been, spending time with friends and family when you can. Phone your mom, phone your best friend, say, how's it? And number 5, try it and find a way to practice mindfulness and or meditation.
Okay. Can you define that? So, slow. Yeah.
Some people have a formal meditation practice where they sit for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes. And there's loads of different types of meditating. You know, I'm not a professional pro in this space, but it's just a time to be still, to focus on breath, to, you know, really kind of like clear the clutter. It's like my brain is a station and the thoughts that come through are trains. what mindfulness has taught me is that I don't have to jump on every train that comes through the station. Right, I can just sit there and watch the trains. That's what...
So mindfulness deals with the mind and the thought processes that goes in there.
I always thought to practice meditation or to be mindful was like I spend 20 minutes not thinking.
20 minutes not thinking.
Right, and that's why I couldn't meditate. Well, what I learned is that the practice is I see the thought come and I don't engage with it. I don't jump on the train. And I learned to meditate using...
I like that.
Using a neuroscientist, Sam Harris's work. Does a 28-day introductory course to meditation, nice and simple, to the point. And just to be able to know that it's my choice whether I engage with my thoughts or not. But you don't have to do that. You can be mindful in the shower. Instead of thinking, what have I got to do next and where am I going and how's... Just be in the shower. A very good place to be mindful is in our cars. We can use those 10, 15, 20 minutes in our cars to just like get still again, you know?
But you have to train your thinking. You have to really be intentional about it.
Just like we need to be intentional about recovery in the beginning, and isn't it worth it?
Yeah, it is very worth it.
Right?
No,
just to say, I see you. I see you, you evil little thought.
Yeah, I can see you, you scumbag.
Right, and I'm not coming along.
Yeah, I deal with a lot of affirmations, you know, and you know, I deal with negativity. You know, I've got affirmations that deals specifically with negativity. You know, I want to be positive. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to meet new people that are going to not necessarily add value, but that are going to be positive.
And that's a growth mindset.
Yes.
Right.
So I believe strongly in the energies that we put out.
Right.
And I train my mind. But let's talk. This is fascinating. You know, you spoke about boundaries. Can you share about boundaries and why they're important?
So a lot of people I work with who don't know that much about boundaries think boundaries are these ideas of yeses and nos. And what I've learned over the years is boundaries are a communication or expression of what I need, want, and value. Right?
Boundaries are?
An expression.
Yes, an expression of
what I need, want, and value.
What I need, what I want,
and what I
value.
Right. Profound. So they're also about what's okay and not okay. So an example of that would be you get home and you've had a really rough week and you're in a bad mood and you kind of grouch around with your partner, and your partner turns around and says, you know what, it's okay that you've had a shitty week at work, and it's not okay if you come home and take it out of me. That's a boundary, right? It's just not
but
like...
It's the way they say it as well.
Right? This is beautiful work by people like Brené Brown. It's not, you can do this and you can't do this. It's like, this is what I need, right? I need to, if you and I are going to work together, I need you to find a way that we can communicate that's respectful with one another. That's a boundary. We just didn't use the word boundary. And the interesting thing is when people come out of growth processes or rehab processes and they start using the word boundary, it freaks people out, right? I say to my clients, we're going to learn to put down boundaries without saying the word boundary, you know? Because when I go home and I start saying, you and I need to talk about boundaries, my partner's already triggered.
Yeah, he's already triggered.
Right? So I want to find a way to say, let's use an example again of home. I get home and I've had a 10-hour day and the house is a mess. My boundary can be something like, it's really difficult for me to come home after a long day at work and the house is a real mess. It really upsets me. What I'm inadvertently doing in these spaces is putting down boundaries, but I'm not blaming you for anything. I'm not accusing you of something. I'm talking about it from an internal place, right? And the boundaries work is hard because, first of all, people have got to figure out what they need, want, and value. And you and I both know in early recovery, I sometimes don't even have a clue.
That's true.
Right? So first, before I start saying, you must do this and you must do that, and I need to go internally again and say, okay, what is it that I need, want, and value in terms of my relationships, my family, my job, my career, my community? Okay, now how do I find a way to be dignified and graceful in communicating that to the people around me, and not like just being a big old boundary boss, you know?
With a walking stick and say, you
Right.
got to establish boundaries.
Right.
What are some of the boundaries that you feel strongly that a recovering addict must have and establish?
So this is one. I know you're really angry with me around all the chaos I've caused and all the hurt that I've created. And I'm really asking you to give me some space to show up differently. Right? Because one of the things that happens is...
Give me space to show up differently.
Right. One of the things that happens is, but you did this and you did that, and remember how you hurt us, and remember how you spent the school fees, and remember that time when, throw it back.
Yes.
So the boundary is, I know you're mad, right? I know you're upset. I know that I've done a lot of hurtful things, and I want to prove to you that I'm going to do things differently now. I just need you to give me some time with that.
In my book, I write about that in the Door and Addict's Journey. I write about when I came back from rehab, you know, because I went for about 8-9 months.
Wow.
So my family, my wife and my children, already created their own world,
Right.
which I was not part of. So when I came in, you know, as an alpha male, you want to break that and say, I'm taking leadership. But you've had all these behaviors that you exhibited over the years that they said, no, we have to create our own, you know, type of setup. So, you know, I went to my sponsor and said, hey, this is what I'm finding. He says, no. You have to create a space. Let them give you a space. They need to observe.
Right. They need to see that
To
you
see
mean...
that you mean what you say.
Right.
Because over the years, your word meant nothing.
And that's another thing, is apology, I promise, I promise. Don't do it.
I promise I won't do it again. I promise this won't happen. And boom, over and over, there's been failures. So they learn to live with the person that you are.
Yes.
So they established a boundary right when I came back and said, no, you will be invited in this group and it will be based on your behaviors.
Fantastic. That's a beautiful, healthy boundary. What we need to be careful of is throwing addiction in people's faces. You know, and I think it's really important for people in recovery to be able to say, it's really hurtful when you do that.
Let's talk about trigger management for an addict. You know, in your space where you're coaching them, what are triggers and how you advise on triggers?
Okay. So the most basic way for me to describe a trigger is the reactions to internal and external emotions, thoughts, feelings, right? And everyone experiences triggers. Not just people in recovery, not just people with substance use disorders, not just people who use drugs. Everybody. Everybody gets triggered or overwhelmed or, you know, cued or stressed by things in their lives. It's a natural survival process that the brain has used for whatever your beliefs are to keep us alive, right? The thing is, when I get triggered, it potentially, in early recovery, it potentially activates a memory of I'm feeling really uncomfortable, angry, overwhelmed, irritated, and my brain says, I've got a solution to that. And the solution is have a drink, do a line, smoke a pipe, whatever it is, and you will feel better. So the trigger is not I'm going to use. The trigger is my body is responding in a certain way to keep me alive, even though we're not needing to survive the way we did when we were hunters and gatherers on the plains of Africa. Okay, so my heart rate increases, my palms get sweaty, my fingers tingle.
Yeah, they tingle. I've had people say, you know, sometimes people, places, and things can become triggers. You know, I've heard a guy said to me, hey, Abner, you know what? You know, I was coming well until my girlfriend did this and triggered me to go and use. And that's why I find, what would you comment around that?
My little platitude around this is don't let your triggers become your excuses.
Don't let your triggers become your excuses.
We all get triggered, right?
Yes.
Even now that you don't use anymore, you get triggered, you get upset, you get overwhelmed. But we learn to slow down in that space. Instead of being reactive in survival, we learn to become responsive. And again, mindfulness is super important here because I want to get out of that reactionary survival, like, let me fight or flight here, into the what I need to do in order to move through this emotion, this feeling, this situation without picking up. And one of my biggest tools for my clients around triggers is values. Let's slow down, put your foot on the pause button, and then ask yourself, if I have this drink, call the dealer, have a line, whatever, how do I honor my value of family, success, career, wealth, wellness? How do I align those two things? But I've got to be using this beautiful kind of frontal area of my brain in order to do that, not in this like freaked out, triggered, like memory-driven reactionary space. I want to be like, I'm triggered, let me pause and slow down and play this movie through. Maybe the first like hour of the movie is really exciting, fun. But what happens after that?
Is there a sensory sensation in how some triggers manifest themselves?
Sure. Like if the trigger moves into an urge or a craving. So what I say is the trigger is emotional. It's the emotional thing that happened, the person I saw, the sound I heard, the experience I had. The urge is more like mental. I could call my dealer, I could go to the bottle store, you know. And the craving is when it starts to become physical, you know. The tightening of your stomach, the fast breathing, the beating heart, you know. That's really your body preparing itself to survive. Those physical feelings of trigger, the brain or the part of the brain that works with memory is saying, but I know what to do, I know what to do. We don't want to allow ourselves to get there. We want to recognize the physical sensations and be like, ooh, let me slow this all down. You know, and breath. You can't beat breath. Right? You can't beat breathing in that situation or going to the kitchen and splashing some water on your face or, you know, getting out of the room and, you know, going stand in the garden for 10 or 15 minutes just to come back into your body and your thinking brain. We don't want to be in our survival brain because our survival brain is saying in order to survive, you need to. We want to be in the thinking brain, especially initially, that says, no, hang on. We've got options. Yeah, we could use, but we could also like phone our sponsor or go to a meeting or, you know, hit the gym for 45 minutes. Again, that's why it's so important to figure out what works for you. Because the things that work for you might not be the things that work for me.
How do you, in your coaching, assist people to rebuild, addicts to rebuild their self-worth, self-appreciation and self-love? Positive self-image is here.
Sure. So I think self-love is at the basis of being well. And the biggest action of self-love that I know is boundaries. So we go back to that whole place, which we've spoken about. I have an interesting relationship with the concept of self-worth because of the way self-worth is measured. So generally self-worth
is measured.
Right. How do we measure self-worth? The car that I drive, the job that I have, the house that I live in. There are a lot of metrics and optics around self-worth that people do struggle with in early recovery because maybe I lost my job and my marriage isn't going so well and my finances are in a bit of a state. Where I encourage my clients to work is let's look at self-worthiness. So where self-worth is those optics, self-worthiness is the stuff within me. It's like my generosity, my kindness, my compassion.
My empathy.
Right. Nobody can take those away from you. And they're immeasurable. So it's a different kind of relationship where I can say, well, I don't feel so good because, you know, I got demoted at work because of my using. I can say, but I'm being really kind and generous with the people in my life. And for that, I have worthiness. Self-worth is tricky, especially in the age of social, right? Because who am I comparing myself to when it comes to self-worth? I'm never going to be as smart as, you know, some of the billionaires out there are rich as them, or as skinny as the models, or as, you know, successful as the celebrities. So we've got to be very careful how we measure our self-worth. And that's why I really like this idea of self-worthiness.
Brilliant. I like that. The distinction between self-worth, which are the optics that really pushes a capitalistic country to say, these are the things, what you drive, what you eat, what you wear, what you,
And
But
if you
self-worthiness.
you look up the definition of self-worth, they will tell you all the things we measure ourselves by, the people we hang out with, the companies we work for. Oh, you work for X company. Wow.
You must be worth something.
Right? Rather than saying, you know, no matter what you do, Abner, I can't take away your integrity and your honesty and your generosity. I can't. The bank can't foreclose on you.
I like that. The bank can't foreclose on you.
No, they can't. Like, they can come take away your car, though, if you get into trouble.
Not the real you.
No. And so living a spiritually principled, spiritually centered life is very important, I think, in building back.
Brilliant.
Self-worth comes from feeling worthy. Self-love is a practice. You know, it's the boundaries I put down. And, you know, self-care is an element of that, you know, going for pedicures and manicures and exercising. But self-love is a lot deeper. And it all starts with self, because if I can love myself and forgive myself and trust myself in recovery, then I can come and ask you to do that.
Sure. Last message. I want you to, this is your camera.
Okay.
I just want you to look at, there's people from all kinds of walks of life looking at you. Our show is Choose Life. What would be Leigh Ann's message to a person struggling with addiction, stopping and starting, going back, relapsing, thinking they are worth nothing, you know, struggling with issues of identity? What would be your message to them, you know, today?
So for me, at the basis of all of this is you need to see that substance use disorders and mental health disorders are about unwellness. Like, if someone is struggling, it's because they're ill, not because they're bad. We way past the days of substance use being a moral issue or a choice issue. It's like, you do matter, right? You can get well. There is help. I know a lot of people will say, but I can't get help. I don't have resources. I don't have medical aid. There is help. You are worth it. This work is hard, but you're worth it. You know, if you have access to nothing else, get to a meeting. Like, you know, there are lots of wonderful, caring, amazing people in the rooms who will help you, who will lead you in the right direction. It's a great place to start if you don't know where else to go, right? You know, or go to your priest or your rabbi or your imam or whoever it is. And I know there's a lot of shame and guilt associated with this, but I promise you that there are people who will meet you with care and compassion and love and empathy. You've done nothing wrong. You've done nothing wrong. Gabor Mate, again, to mention him, asked the question, not why the addiction, but why the pain.
Not why the addiction?
But why the pain? You know, so we need to get into safe spaces where people can meet us with compassion and empathy, and I promise those spaces exist. You know, our communities may not always understand, our families may not always understand, but there are spaces, you know, to get well in. And there was a thing that I saw on a wall once. It was in a movie, but it was on the wall of a rehab, and it said, remember that addicts are ill people trying to get well, not bad people trying to be good.
Brilliant.
You know, so...
With that note, Leigh Ann, I just want to appreciate you and just thank you. It's just you're just such a wealth of knowledge, and appreciate you. And the experiences that you've gone through, I'm sure they will assist somebody watching, somebody listening, to say, end of the day, there is a way out.
There is, always.
I can pick up a phone, I can call somebody will point me. This morning I facilitated a call of a friend of mine who's in the space of motivation.
Oh, wow.
Whose friend is struggling with alcohol, and we're in a three-way line for almost 45 minutes.
Amazing.
You know, and I said to the guy, there is a way out. So you listening at home on Choose Life podcast, we just want to tell you, it's possible. You can come out. Never write yourself off. There's nothing wrong with you. You just have a disease. Just reach out to somebody and get help. Get help. We are choosing life. And in this day and age, where people are isolated and are struggling, there is a way out. Choose life, because it's possible. Leigh, I just want to say thank you. Here's a token of appreciation.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
For coming and
I had a blast.
Yeah, I had a blast. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I know that this is precious time for you, but together we can transform and change the world in which we live in. People are struggling with mental illness, lack of rehabs, no money to go to rehabs. But with this podcast, we are saying it's possible that you can choose life. A journey of 1,000 miles begin with a first step. You can begin with a first step and call a friend. And I'm sure, don't die alone. Don't capitulate and give in and give up. There is a way out. And we look forward to seeing you once again next week on Choose Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Abna Mariri, the one and only. Leigh Ann, thank you so much for joining us.
Great pleasure.
Thank you for watching Choose Life, the podcast. Please give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button below. Remember to also click the notification bell so you never miss an update from us. There are more Choose Life conversations on YouTube. Just click on one of the thumbnails on the screen to continue watching. Thanks for choosing us, and we'll see you in the next episode as we choose life together.